Welcome back to Tales from the Enchanted Forest with your hosts, Fox and Sparrow.
Konnichiwa. Welcome back, everybody. We are so excited to have you here. And we are not alone this week. We have a very special guest joining us.
So, every week we start by talking about things we are into. And this week we are very into Japanese yokai. And so we have a fantastic guest. She is the host of the Uncanny Japan podcast and author of 2 fictional collections with tales based on Japanese folktales and horror. Her debut nonfiction work, The Book of Japanese Folklore, released just last month. So please help us welcome Thersa Matsuura to the Enchanted Forest.
Konnichiwa. Thank you. It's so lovely to be here.
Welcome, welcome. We're so happy to have you. We've been doing this for a while, and it's like always fun to meet another fellow kindred spirit who's just into folklore and stuff. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thersa Matsuura, that's my name. How do we do this? I live in Japan. I've been here since 1990, so about 34 years. I've lived longer in Japan than I have in the States.
Ooh.
And yeah, I'm just kind of like in the rural outback doing my little folklore thing and writing and studying. And that's about it.
I feel like we're the same person at this point.
Nice.
Outback, middle of nowhere, Austria, just in the mountains somewhere, writing about folklore and enjoying, just learning things and picking up stuff. And you read a lot of Japanese as well, right? Because you speak Japanese, so you read a lot of these stories in the native language.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, that's fun. It's like a mystery. Try to figure everything out.
Uncovering it.
I too feel like a kindred spirit. I'm in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a big city, and that's the same thing, right? I'm included.
You're included.
No.
One of us.
Yeah.
One of us.
I have not yet abandoned the big city to find my cute small town with all these horror or mystery, like just spookiness. I do love the small town vibes because it really feels like anything can happen in them. And it's not because I'm obsessed with British murder mysteries where everything happens in small towns.
Well, we're not big enough to have many different things in the place I am, but we do have 2 Krampus museums. So if that tells you anything about our priorities, that's, I think, a good indicator.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. 2. Because one's not enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's great about small towns. Yeah. I think that's what's really great about small towns is they really embrace kind of the folklore, the history. And so we have a lot of just there's lots of holidays that are based on things like Petra tags, so different folklore creatures and stuff. And so it's always nice to kind of, I guess, come from a place like Canada and you come to a place like Austria where it's everywhere and it's all the time and it's such a different vibe. Because I mean, Canada's so young and we do have the Native Americans, but I feel like Canadian folklore isn't really a thing.
Yeah.
And then you come to Austria and it's just
similar. That's exactly how I feel. Oh my gosh. Like from America, I'm like, it's such a baby. There's like no history to the land. And you come here and you're like, oh my gosh, thousands of years, things have happened right here in this piece of land.
There's things that happen here that are older than my entire country.
It's just incredible to look back. And I think sometimes with Canada and America too, it's like we picked 1 or 2 things that happened the past 100 years and they're like, this is a big defining moment, let's just focus in on that really hard. We're like, but nothing else happened.
Yeah, that's it.
We got founded, that thing happened, we're good.
In defense of Canada and America, I will say it is quite cool to see how different traditions come together in places like Canada and America because they are such melting pots. So you do have such a cool mix of folklore that's come from all over the world and become kind of American / something else folklore, or you have Canadian / something else folklore. So that's also quite cool. And I think that's something that you don't really see in places like Austria. So pros and cons to everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. Because the culture is so almost homogenous. It's very straight because you have a strict history. You have people that have lived here since the dawn of time for them. So it's a bit different than when you have mass immigration and you have mass movements that have come at different time periods. And so that's always interesting to see how folklore moves as well in that way.
before we get too much further into the episode, one thing we usually like to do to start things off is to talk about what we're currently into. As our regular listeners might know, I don't get a ton of chances to talk with Fox to find out what she's up to, and I certainly want to know what Theresa is currently up to this week. Do you guys want to get started? I want to know what is got your current obsession? What's vibing with you this week?
Should I go first?
Yeah, feel free.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, go ahead. You seem
I
really
am
excited.
yes, because I remembered what I'm really into.
Yeah.
Crows. I am so into crows. I have befriended a pair of crows. It's been almost a year now, and we're getting closer and closer. And it is the joy, and my everyday joy is to go out and call them, and they come, and I get to feed them unsalted peanuts and little pieces of fish, and they're adorable, and they hop around and they do funny things, and I'm teaching them to count. Like if that's a thing I don't know, they probably know how to count, but I'm like, one
No.
fish, two fish, three, here you go, and then they come down and so yeah, that is absolutely my obsession. Crows are my life. I'm in a house now where I can't have pets. I love pets. I've
Hmm.
always had dogs. I've always had
Hmm.
cats. So it's been 3 years without I had a rat and I have an axolotl and I have some
Oh,
minnows, but yeah, the crows just kind of complete the family. So,
mm,
so that's my
that's
into thing.
that's amazing. Crows are
That's
so
amazing.
intelligent. I could
They're so
totally,
smart.
I think they can count. They are just known to do so many crazy things. Oh my gosh. And you've been
I have so many stories.
chosen by
I've
crows?
been chosen,
You've
and
been chosen by the
and they've
crows.
started to started to bring little gifts, but the little gifts are like little funny little leaves, and they'll leave them, and I just feel like, oh, I'm getting gifts now. So, yeah, we'll see
Oh,
if they ramp up and like bring little shiny things, and I'm there for my crows.
Yes.
this is the dream. You're like the
It
Disney
is.
princess of the crows. Oh,
Right? Oh my goodness. Oh, how did this even start? Did you just notice one day and then
I
fed it?
did. I noticed one out front of my house and I talked to it. I'm like, I really like animals. Like I've
Mhm.
always just liked animals more than anything or anyone. So I was just like, hey, hi, how are you? But it kept coming back and I was like, oh, it recognizes me. And then I
yeah.
just started putting little pieces of food out and then it would come. And then my neighbor got angry because she saw it and she was a little nasty. So then I moved. We have a veranda where I sleep, so there's like an air conditioner unit. So I
Mhm.
started putting it there, and then the crow figured out like, if I go down there, mean lady. If I come up here, mean lady doesn't see me, and I can eat the peanuts.
Yes.
Yay! And here's my girlfriend. I call her Sweet Pea, and then she comes too. So
Oh,
yeah, it's been a journey, and yeah, I'm thinking about starting a blog about it, like my crow
oh,
journey, my crow buddy journey, or something like that.
Oh my God, I would, you know what? If you document it, because and this is I'm not sure if this is a coincidence, but on Instagram, there's a guy who feeds the crows and he puts like little like trinkets and stuff. And he always starts with the crows are here. And it's one of the I am obsessed with this Instagram page because he usually like puts different tricks or treats or he puts like distractions to see what they're going to do, and it's
Yes.
honestly it's so fun to watch the crows like pick at something and then they realize, oh, this isn't what I want, these are empty, I'm going to go check this out, and then they're quite clever,
Yes,
and it's
yes,
always just so
yes.
nice to see them.
I did. I put out things like a little like doll and then a shell and then some shiny thing, and I'd wait and see which one they would they take them, would they not? And they took the shells. They liked the shells, so they took
Hmm.
them and they did something with them. Sometimes I gave them potatoes. I boiled potatoes,
mm.
peeled the potatoes, potato skins. They still have potatoes on them, and they yeeted those. They're like they just threw them everywhere. So I didn't see it, but I just imagined like them going, "What is this? This isn't the food I want."
Oh,
So yeah. Oh, I'm gonna have to find that Instagram. That sounds so cool.
I will send it
Going.
to you over Twitter because I love these. I just love seeing wild animals be so smart and so clever and just working with it because I feel like we have this idea that animals aren't the brightest. And my new kittens are making a definite bid for that. They are not very smart. They're very pretty. Um, so just to segue from your animals to
Yes,
my
yes.
animals,
What are your
we
animals?
recently got 7-month-old kittens. They're sisters. One of them is called Minerva because she's quite smart. She's very clever. Like she almost immediately realized that the laser pointer, the laser is in my hand. and not on the ground. So she will, whenever you have the laser pointer, she will look at it and she'll look at your hand. She'll watch your hand instead.
Oh, smart.
Her
Yeah.
sister is the type that doesn't really have object permanence yet. So if you have a string and you move the string on the ground in a direct line behind you, she looks around like, where did it go? So
Fun.
she's not that bright. But
Spoilers.
now that I have, yeah,
Spoilers.
go
They
ahead.
never fully grasp object permanence. They get pretty good, but they don't. I don't think. I'm not convinced they fully grasp it. Luna is still like, I hide something. She's like,
Where'd it go?
it's probably in her hand, but where'd it go?
The magic.
Yeah, they're so I'm hoping that she gets a little bit, but they both have their own personalities. And I've never had pets. So I'm the opposite to you in that case, Teresa. I've never had pets besides maybe like a goldfish that I think died when I was young. So these are my first real pets. And it's really weird because cats are so strange. And we were talking about the cat yokai, the Bakiniko, I think is how you say it, right?
Bakineko.
How do you pronounce?
Bakineko.
Yeah, the Bakiniko.
Bakineko. Uh-huh.
And I was reading in the book and how you say that, the cats were doing weird things and people naturally were like, that looks really strange. Why are they acting this way? And so that's kind of where the stories come from. And 100% looking at my cats, I believe it. I'm like, if I saw my cat and I had never seen a cat before, or if I didn't know what this creature was and I saw it in the middle of the night with its glowing eyes and its weird like hackles and some of the strange like sounds they make, I would think this is a demonic possessed creature. So it was a nice tie-in because I got cats when I got your book and I was like, so my cat isn't just weird. It's just cats have always been weird and people have always thought cats were weird. So that's been my thing. I've just been obsessed with my cats. I think they're not so much obsessed with me, except when I have a
Aw.
treat in my hand. Well, they are when we want to play, but prime playtime for me is after work. Prime playtime for them is between the hours of 12 and 1 in the morning. So right when I'm in bed, they're like, I want to play. And Minerva, actually, she's taught herself fetch. She realizes if she brings me her toy, I will throw it. It's always just out of reach, but she understands that if she takes her toy and she brings it right near me, I will reach for it and then I'll throw it for her.
They always want to
So-
make you work for it.
I'm happy to do it because when she taught herself that, I was just like, this is the cleverest cat that's ever lived in the entire world. I am the owner of the smartest cat. And then the next day, of course, she ran away and then she came back home. So I was like, jail time for you.
Grounded.
Yeah, they're both grounded right now because we live on the second floor. And so we do have a way of them coming down, but they're still really small. So the vet recommends not letting them out for a little bit. So they get used to home and they get used to finding their way and they're a little bit, bigger. And so they're in jail right now inside the house. Eventually they'll be outdoorish, indoorish, depending on what they want to do. But yeah,
But they will be some level of indoorish. They have some choices, but gosh dang it.
Well, I feel like you can already kind of tell because Cassie doesn't spend a lot of time at the windows. She's happy just to like lay around and she sleeps a lot like by our feet or on our laps. But Minerva's always at the window. Like we had to get, because the windows here, they tilt out. And I've never seen that in Canada before, but in Austria, the windows tilt out. So you don't have to open them all the way, but they don't have screens. So that's how she escaped last time. She just jumped out the tilt. So now we have little grates that go in. So it's literally jail for her. But I've been obsessed with my cats this week. And what about you, Sparrow? What are you obsessed with?
Well, I'm kind of like taking on an obsession from somebody else in my life. My niece has been coming over a lot to hang out, and I've been like spending time with her, and she has been super into just coloring and stuff. Like that seems to be one of her like main passions right now. Though she wouldn't tell you, she's like 6, so she's way too cool to tell me like, yeah, it's fine, it's cool, But I could tell she's into it. So I was like, maybe I should crack out my my adult coloring book. So I've been kind of pulling that out and that's been very like soothing. I've been putting on like a podcast. I've been putting on like a show in the background and just kind of going to town on this. I am by no means an artist. And talk to any of my art teachers growing up, they were like, she can do a lot of things. Let's not focus on this one. But I can color in the boxes and stuff, so I have been having fun doing that and kind of sharing that experience with my niece. So that's kind of what I've been into is just doing that. Not as expansive. Don't worry, I didn't get a new video game this week, everybody. I did something different. Yay!
See,
Restraining
I feel like the
myself.
coloring books and stuff, I feel like crafts and coloring books and stuff are really great for people who want that creative outwork and want to like make something with their hands or do something, but they don't necessarily know how to do the art itself. Teresa, I know, or I'm guessing, because I watch your podcast on YouTube, and I watch the drawings and the colorings and the illustrations. So I think that you're a great artist. But how is that for you to do so much of it? Because I just feel like you are the triple, like the hat trick here. You do the podcast, you do the writing, you do the art, and I'm just impressed beyond everything.
You're
So I
so
do love
sweet.
well, I do
No.
love the illustrations in this book, but I was like,
Yes,
I want
yes,
a
they are.
book
They're
that has
gorgeous.
Thersa Matsuura art in it with her writing. When am I gonna get that?
The moment the book arrived, she just sent me like 20 pictures being like, look at this book, look at it. It's beautiful. I kid you not.
Yeah, yeah. The artist, Michelle Wang, she's like really, really
Yes.
cool. Oh my gosh. And
Oh,
her Instagram too. No, I am just I have no shame, I guess it is. I know I'm no good, but I don't care because I know that I can't get good unless I'm not good, right? Like you have to do something to
Exactly.
get better at it, right? And I'm like at an age now where I'm like, you know what? Just do it. And if someone says, "Oh, that's terrible," I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. It is terrible. Maybe I'll do better next time." Like I don't even care anymore. So
I love
yeah,
that.
so it's something like Michelle Wong, like looking at her
mhm.
Instagram where she shows like how she does it, and I'm just like jaw on the floor going, "That's what an artist is." And me, I'm like sketch, sketch, sketch. I'm like speed
I
it up so
like
it looks
both.
better.
I'm a big fan of both because these illustrations are just gorgeous. It's so nice to
Mm.
see kind of the pictures and then you have the text and then you have everything that comes all together. But I will say, I do also enjoy listening to your podcast and then watching you draw at the same time because it's like
Oh,
something for my eyes to do while I'm listening.
there's that.
Because
Yeah.
I do tend, I know a lot of people don't like watching podcasts on YouTube, but I'm a like I only really watch it on YouTube,
Oh.
and so it's always nice to see that what your interpretation, what your take of a creature is as
Uh,
you're telling the story from your retelling as well. So I just think it's beautifully tied together, and I just wanted to make sure
Thank
I point that
you.
out because I remember watching your recent Kappa one, I think, and I was just like, how is she doing everything?
uh, Not well. That's the thing. It's like just a little bit of everything, and yeah, yeah. Just try. That's my motto.
She's a bard. She's got the jack of all trades feet, and she's just rocking everything. I love it. So as we kind of mentioned, Fox has had the opportunity to read your book, and I know she's had so many burning questions. I kid you not. She's got a ton, and she was like, "Can I ask this question? Is this too many?" and stuff. But before we dive into those big important questions I've got one important question of my own.
Okay.
Um, One of our favorite things about covering stories is seeing all the different reoccurring tropes that come like from all these stories, from whether it be like from hundreds of years ago or whether it be like last week's Marvel movie or whatever. We
Mhm.
just love seeing them come back in these reoccurring ideas. So we want to know, do you have a favorite trope or like a least favorite trope throughout like Japanese stories or just in general? Like what tropes work for you?
So I was thinking, okay, so I do. I have my least favorite, and I hope I don't make anyone angry, is uh sexy kitsune, like the fox being that I'm like, I get it, I get it, but it's like over and over and over. And like I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
but maybe
Yeah.
not so sexy kitsune. Why not? Why not like
Yeah,
normal girl kitsune or something like that? So that
exactly.
one I see a lot, especially maybe here in Japan. I don't know. I haven't been home in so long. I'm not sure how like everywhere it is there, but here it's like everywhere, like the
Oof.
sexy kitsune, which is okay, okay, I get it, but yeah, let's do normal girl too. And
Yeah.
then my favorite trope is, and I actually started writing that, and I still write like that, is any kind of yokai who is or mythical creature or some kind of like supernatural something that is in like modern society, like just kind of
Mhm.
blending in, like just there, kind of a
Mhm.
mythical realism, but I call it
urban
magic. I call it mythical.
fantasy.
Yeah, like magical realism, but I call it mythical realism. Yeah, yeah. Urban fantasy. So you've got just regular life, but the teacher is an oni ogre or something like that. So
Yeah.
I do like that because there's just so much you can do there, and
Mhm.
it doesn't get old
Mhm.
for me. I'm like, yeah,
Oh,
that's a good way of doing it. Huh, cool.
I love it. I love it. It's those are I especially resonate with that last one. Like, oh yeah, I love just seeing like uh, those stories where like, and yeah, there's an orc here. It's just like let's just roll with it. It's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, just
We're not
yeah.
gonna talk about it, but it's just fun. It's why
Suspend
not?
disbelief. It
Hmm.
works.
Awesome.
Yeah, I do like mythical realism. I do like fantasy a lot more though. So I'm on the other spectrum.
Ah,
Like, give me everything magical. But
oh,
I do like the idea of having just elements of folklore and elements of myth everywhere in real life, but
Hmm.
like in hidden places. So unexpected places for me would be more what I would do.
mm.
But the sexy fox girl is, as
Oh,
someone who's been recently to Canada, it's everywhere.
Oh,
It's
is
the
it? Yeah.
trope, I think. People just, I feel like when they associate things with Japan and with yokai, a lot of it is sexualized, sadly. And so there
Mm-mm.
is like the sexy fox girl. There's a lot of just like different cosplays that go on. And I just want to see yokai as like the girl who's just going to kill you, like the
Yeah,
murderous fox
yeah.
girl, the
Right,
evil
right,
fox girl.
right,
I don't need like,
can't we
she
just
could
have
be
a
fully clothed.
regular murder girl for once, you
right.
know? That's all we're asking
There's
for.
so many aspects of them.
People have other motives, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I would
I did want to
go.
jump into a little bit
Mhm,
about Japan.
mhm.
So we've talked about it a little bit in the beginning, and as a fellow North American who moved overseas, I did it for love. So how did you settle on Japan, and what does that process kind of look like for you?
So mine was it was 1990. So this is like way, way, way
Hmm.
back, like pre-internet and back in the old ages of time. And I was university. I was really into China and Japan at the time. I very much into Buddhism and martial arts. And I was studying martial arts and I was
Hmm.
studying Buddhism. And the martial arts was Chinese, the Buddhism was Japanese. I was taking Chinese. Realized that while I love the characters, the kanji characters in Chinese, I was really bad at pronouncing and understanding them. Liked writing them, that was awesome, but the actual saying something in Chinese, I couldn't. And then when I started studying Japanese, it's very easy to say. It's a very, very easy language to pronounce, and it's very easy to understand. And you have the kanji characters, and I was like,
Hmm.
this is it. So like light bulb moment. And yeah, as I was in my fourth year of university and I was walking down the hall, I had like 12 majors I had gone through, blown through in 4 years, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I'm like, hey, I got credits for everything. What do I want to do when I grow up? So I went down the hall, went to my like guidance counselor or whatever they're called, and as I was walking in, there was like a poster on the wall for, study in Japan for 1 year, our sister university. I'm like, no way. So I'm like, hey, what's that out there? And they're like, why don't you try? And I'm like, maybe I will. And that's how I got the scholarship. So 2 years originally,
Amazing.
just
Hmm.
studying at the university.
Mhm.
And then I had always wanted to write. My big thing is I want to be a writer when I was very little.
Mhm.
And I couldn't write because I had nothing to write about. My life is just so boring. There's nothing. So I had a choice like, do I want to stay in Japan? It's going to be very hard. Again,
Mhm.
no internet. I talked to my parents once a month because phone calls were,
Mhm.
you have this international
Oh.
phone booth there's like one international phone booth and 20-minute walk from there and whatever. It was just like a pain in the butt. But you know
Hmm.
what? I bet I'll get good stories if I stay.
Mhm.
So I decided to stay and ended up getting married and moved more rural. And then what I thought was a culture shock really wasn't, because it wasn't until I actually got into a Japanese family that I was like,
Ah.
wow, things are different. It's not
Ah.
Kansas anymore. There are things that are way different. That was weird and cool. And I adapted. So that's how I got here. Yeah.
So what was
Amazing.
that culture shock like once you moved? Because you obviously lived in Japan before for a bit, and
Mhm.
then you got married and you were with your in-laws and everyone. So what kind of things happened that made you kind of realize, oh, this is much more different as someone on the inside now?
Everything I did was wrong. So by my mother-in-law's, like even my neighborhood, because I first we lived with my in-laws and I
Hmm.
was studying Japanese and I'm learning Japanese. I wasn't perfect, but I was trying.
Mhm.
But it was her job to teach me. And
Mhm.
just everything I did was, oh, I just couldn't do anything right. Things like an example I was just telling somebody was after we moved. So we moved into a new house out of the in-laws house because that was a lot, and I need to be by
Mhm.
myself. Let's move to our own place. So we moved to our own place,
Hmm.
and refrigerator broke. Okay, I'm gonna do
Uh-huh.
this myself. I'm gonna be a big girl, and I'm gonna go and buy my own refrigerator. So I drive over, find a refrigerator, buy it, and I need to get it delivered. So I'm so proud of myself. I get out the calendar. I'm like, oh, you deliver
Hmm.
this next week at Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Yay. So I go back home, really proud of myself, go to my mother-in-law's house. We're having tea. And I said, oh, by the way, got a new refrigerator. It's going to come tomorrow at 2. And she gets out the calendar and she's just like, no, no, not next week, Tuesday at 2, or whatever, right? She's just like having this thing. And I'm like, what? That's the worst, that's a bad day for having things delivered. And I'm like, it's a bad day for having things a what? And there's a thing called rokudo in Japan that older generations, younger people probably not so much, but older generations believe is every day, it's kind of a rolling, I think it's like 6 or something days where you have a day that's good for inviting friends over, or a day that's bad for everything. You shouldn't leave the house, or a day where the morning is good or the afternoon is good. And the elderly people around me and my mother-in-law, my in-laws would absolutely look at the calendar no matter what you did. I'm going to go visit my friend. You look at the calendar, you're like, oh, today's a good day to visit your friend in the afternoon. Okay, let's go. And very strict. Uh,
Oh.
it's funny because even things like funerals. So a funeral
Mhm.
is before, if someone passes away, you have the wake and then you have the funeral. Funerals are planned also looking at this. I think even this might even be young people too. There's a thing called tomobiki, which means pulling your friend. And that's good for if you want to have a party. Like, hey, pull your friends in and have a party. It's really nice. But you don't want to have a pull your friend at a funeral. So if someone
Ah.
dies, and normally the funeral would be like the next day after the wake, but it's a tomobiki, it's a pulling your friend day, you can't. So you have to put it
Oh.
off.
Mm.
So there are times when the calendar works in a way like the funeral doesn't get, it's like a week later because the
Oh.
days don't line up. And it's that, like so many things like that were just like, okay, this is really hard. I got to think differently. I have to open my mind and learn, like how to understand, like just
Hmm.
like how to
Mhm.
deal, not deal and understand this. So yeah, there was an epiphany moment in there where I went from like kind of not fighting my mother-in-law, but kind of like in
Mhm.
tears, like, oh, I can't do
Oh.
anything right, to, you know
Oh.
what? Why
Oh.
is it like that? Maybe I should learn why it's like that. And
Yeah.
that got me to writing. I'm like, okay, if I can
Mm.
convey this to somebody else, this is really interesting, then that
Hmm.
would be cool. Like if I can write a story that would show this, and maybe someone
Hmm.
else would like, oh, that's funny, interesting. So yeah, that was that process.
It's funny how like
That's
conflict like that can just inspire like your
Yeah,
artistic side. Like, oh, how can I put this out on the page? Whether it be through words or like paint, you know?
I mean,
exactly.
I really
Exactly.
resonate with that because one of the first published essays I wrote was about my mother's superstitions. Because
Nice.
growing up in an immigrant family, like my
Mm,
mom had a lot of superstitions that she brought with her. And I mean, I'm a little bit ashamed to say, but growing up, I was a little bit like, you're so backwards. Like, why are you thinking like this? We like this
right.
doesn't make sense in Canada. Like, these things don't have any logic to them. Like, she would say things like, you can't cut your nails at night, or she'd be
Yes,
like, you
same.
can't, whistle. Like, she would just say things that to me as like a teenager, I was just like, what's wrong with you? Like, this doesn't make any sense. There's no like logic to this. And I think as a teenager, I really pushed back against her kind of superstitions and her beliefs. Or she would say, oh, this day isn't auspicious, or like this day is like this. And I would rebel like crazy because it didn't make sense to me. And there were parts of my culture that I just wasn't into because I was just
Mm,
like, this has no place in a modern society for me. But for her, I think that they were parts of her culture that she grew up with. So it was
mhm,
folklore, it was superstition, it was stories that she had grown up with that were just part of her life. So when she
mhm.
moved, she brought them with her. And I think once I moved away, now I do those things. Like I tell my husband, like, don't clip your nails at night. Like it'll bring in the bad spirits, or don't cut the air because you're cutting, God or something. And I'm not religious. So like when I say stuff like that, he looks at me like I'm crazy. But I'm like, it's stuff that I've brought on from my mom. And I think it's because I've moved away. And it is kind of an isolating experience to move away from everything into like a small town specifically as well. And so I think I brought her superstitions with me
Hmm.
because I understand them a lot better now. And so I did a lot of research into them. I looked into them, and I think a lot of them still don't make sense to me because I'm like, this is just, what people thought at the time was to ward off the bad spirits, and this is how they thought they do it. But I do it now anyway because a lot of it I believe is more cultural to me, and it doesn't
Mm,
matter if it doesn't make sense to anyone. To me, I'm just
mhm,
like, you know what? This is a part of my mother's culture, my father's culture. It's part of my culture. I want to bring it here as well. So I
mm,
do it too. So I really resonate when you say, like, it's very
mm.
frustrating when you don't understand the superstitions and you're just kind of like, what does this mean? And you do everything wrong, and then you get told off for something that doesn't make logical sense. But
Right,
I feel like once you embrace it, it's just different. You get a different
right.
outlook
It
on
changes. It's interesting you mentioned the cutting your nails because it's the same in Japan. Don't cut your nails at night. That was one of the things I got. So I don't know. It's
Okay.
very awesome that it connects there.
it.
But I did figure out here at least why there is that superstition, and what it is so one thing I love doing, and I think this is my thing, is to find something like one of those things like don't cut your nails at night because the bad spirits will come, or
Mhm.
someone will, yeah, whatever, the dorobo is like a robber will come in and steal you away, whatever. So I'm like, okay, that's not going to happen. But why not cut your nails? So I dug, and I found that in times of old in Japan, the way they cut their fingernails were like, now we have these nice little fingernail clippers, but they were actually quite scary. They're very big, and they're very like chomp 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 kind of cutters. I can't
Ah.
describe them. It's kind of
Oh.
weird. So if it's at night and it's dark because there's no electricity, right? You got
Mhm.
candlelight and you're
Mm.
sitting there with these it's very easy to cut your finger. So the thought is, I'm using air quotes, I don't know, but it's kind of believed that maybe that's where it came from. Like, you could tell a
Mm.
kid, don't cut your nails at night because you're going to cut off your finger. But, or you could say, hey, ghost is going to come and get you. And they're like, oh,
Ah,
dear.
yes.
Okay. And maybe that's where it came from, at least here. I think that's what I figured out. I kind of made peace with that one. But the whistling too. We have whistling too. Don't whistle at night
Yeah.
because snakes come. And that one I haven't figured out.
Well, here I am just panically looking at my nails because I just trimmed them last night in the dark. Now I'm like, oh no,
Oh,
I hope
you're
those
still here
spirits are
though.
else. I'm still here.
Oh, wait, what's that
So,
thing behind you?
My God. And so you said you went to Japan pre-internet, pre kind of like the widespread knowledge of anime and kind of Crunchyroll and the Ghibli movies and
Yeah.
everything, kind of just the big widespread Japanese phenomenon. So what was it like kind of researching without the internet? Like, you had to go to libraries and bookstores and it was all in Japanese, or how did that look like for you in the
It was
early
all in,
days?
yeah, so it was all in Japanese. It was, yeah, library and asking a lot of people.
Hmm.
Again, my neighbors were, so I wasn't working at the time, lots of elderly women, and I'd find out like a name of a kappa. It's a river creature. That's all. So I'd go over. I'm like, hey, you know, in very bad Japanese, I heard this thing called a kappa, and what does it do? And they'd be like, oh, kappa. Let me tell you about a kappa, and I'd write it down. Or yeah, like anime in Japanese. Taking notes like with my notebook at like 5 a.m. Gegege no Kitaro is a great one because they have all kinds of like creatures in there, and just writing things down and then going to someone later and saying, "What's this?" and yeah, but it wasn't really until the internet when I was able to truly, yeah, dive in. Yeah,
It's a lot
Hmm.
easier now, I imagine, because we just Google it and then
Yeah,
we find a bunch of sources, and you have things like the
right.
Internet Archive, and you can just
mhm.
kind of, I feel like the access is a lot bigger here.
Yeah, a lot was mysterious back then. Like a lot I didn't know.
Did you have any moments where you read something in English and then you read it in Japanese and they were so wildly different that you kind of had to wonder where the English version came from? Or maybe you heard the same story but told completely differently from two different people? How do the discrepancies look like?
Oh, so you're talking about like hearing something in English about something and then also in
Yes, like a
Japanese. Oh,
yokai or a story.
yes.
Yes.
Just recently, last year it was, there is a doll whose hair grows. Her name's Okiku. Okiku is a doll, and she's very, very old, pre-war or something. And she's got this hair, and it grows, and it's like really creepy and everything. And I was reading about it in Japanese, and it never was creepy in Japanese. It was more uh the girl who loved her passed away, and it was more of a sweet thing, not so much a scary thing. But everything in Japanese had it full out horror. It was, talk about tropes, trope upon trope, and then it drinks the girl's blood. And I'm like, that's not Japanese. No, that wouldn't happen. So my son moved up to Hokkaido, and then I found out the doll was actually in Hokkaido. So I'm like, that's it. I am stopping. And it's like way in the middle of nowhere. And I had to like drive 2 hours in the middle of really, really nowhere to find this. It's kind of a shrine, but it's actually a home. They have a shrine inside this
Mhm.
person's home. So you have
Mhm.
to ring the doorbell. And I'm like, I'm gonna get down to the to the truth of this doll. And just to feel the vibe, right? Because you see pictures of it and it
Mhm.
does look creepy. It's old and it's
Mhm.
kind of yeah, it's old. It looks kind of a little bit creepy. So I'm like, is this a scary thing or is this not a scary thing? So I go drive there, ring the bell, lady answers, and I'm like, "Hi, I'm here to see the doll." And she's like, "Come in." And we go in there, not a creepy vibe at all. It was actually
Oh.
very sweet, and she talked to me about it, and um, also, yeah, like the hair doesn't grow anymore so much, and they just kind of almost like in Shinto where it's become like a god almost, like there's a
Mm.
kami or a spirit residing in it, and we pay respect to it, and it doesn't do anything bad at all. So I was
Mm.
kind of happy, but I still like every once in a while. The other day, there's like Twitter or X, whatever
Yeah.
it is, someone put up a picture of it and said something terrible, like this doll is, and like 30K likes and people going, that's so cruel,
Yeah.
that's so evil. And I go in there with my little self going, actually, it's not a
Actually.
bad doll.
Actually.
It's a nice doll. Everyone ignored me. Like
Oh,
nobody listened to me
Yeah.
because that's not a good
rude.
story. No one wants to hear it's a good doll. So, but yeah, that's something that totally changed. Like, yeah, the English version of what it is and the Japanese version is just night and day. But usually they're
Wow.
pretty close. Usually people are pretty good at keeping them the same.
But sometimes it's amazing, like when you can't trust Twitter or X, like you think it should be 100% reliable, and then it
Not
betrays you.
anymore.
Like,
Well, I think that's the downside of the internet. Like, there's obviously like the good side is you have so much access to information, but then I guess the downside is people can spread information, the misinformation so much quicker as well. And you see
Mhm.
one tweet and you're like, this is exactly what this folklore creature is. Even on our Instagram or Twitter, we'll give one version of a story and it'll be a regional difference. So I will put up a story that's from a specific region. It's a very specific, story. And then someone will always comment and say, that's not the true story. The true story is this. And they'll reference a story from a different region. I'm like, well, different
Congratulations.
countries, different regions,
Yes.
different areas have different versions of the same characters or the same stories. And I just find it so weird how people are so easily like combative about, no, you're wrong.
Yes.
This is what it's actually. And I'm just like,
Yes,
well,
actually.
stories move and stories are mapped out. And one thing I was quite passionate about in university was mapping the Silk Road and stories and how they
Ooh.
travel.
Hmm.
And so I just think stories come from a point, but they move around, they change, and obviously different regions will have different stories. And I think something you mentioned in your book as well is that there are different regional takes, and what you just said as well. It's completely different from region to region. Sometimes it's similar, sometimes the same spirit will be good, sometimes it'll be bad. So I just can't get over like the Twitter X mob
Right.
sometimes. I'm
Mob.
so
And time too. You've got time. So you've got regions and you have time. Like
Mhm.
there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years here that we've got a story that is changing as it's being told and moved around. So
Yeah.
yeah, and like you do too. I do. I'm like, okay, this is my area right now. This is the story I'm getting. Don't come at me, bro. Come on, please. This is, I can't tell you all the different ones. I don't even know them. But yeah, we need to be more open that way, right?
Yeah. So, talking about the different regions and time periods, did you have any kind of major challenges with your research when you were compiling the 45 different yokai for the story, like in terms of what to include, what to cut off, anything like that?
Yes. So it started off, I knew there was going to be, they approached me and said, what do you think about pitching the book to our big top editors? And I said, yes, let's do that. And I knew it was going to be 45 chapters. And it started off very easy because you take the biggies, you got your kappa, you got your fox, you got your tanuki, raccoon dog, you get all the
Mhm.
big ones. And then I went, okay, lesser known. So I started going for lesser known ones. And then the last five I had like 5 left I had to choose, but I had like 30 more I wanted to cover, and I had to say, oh, which
Oh.
ones are going to be in there? So there's some were in and got taken out at the last minute and put
Aw.
back in, and so it was all that. And the time, again, being a very short deadline was extremely, well, extremely difficult, of course, but there, when I'd get, so even one chapter, right, I had like, a day I have to just research the crap out of it and write it and rewrite it. And they're so rich and they're so deep. And again, the history's so long and the regions are so different.
Mhm.
And everything was a rabbit hole. Like, I want to study this more. Like I do, chapter number 1, Abe no Seimei, A. And I'm just coming down. I'm like, oh, but I don't want to stop. And I'm like, okay, but a bookmark in this, I have to move on. I have to move on. So move on. Next one. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so interesting. Oh no, I didn't know that. I didn't know this, but I have to move on. So that was kind of hard.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I have all these things I have to go back and restudy deeper. Yeah.
Always more to learn, right?
Yeah, always
Always
more to
more to
learn.
find.
Ugh, I hate word limits because I always find like when there's a word limit, you always want to say more because there's
Yeah.
so much to say and cutting it down. Is there any honorable mention of a creature or a yokai that you didn't mention that you really want to put in the second edition or that you really want to make sure
People
that
are know
comes up in
about.
another book?
Oh, several people have been saying, "Hey, is there a number 2?" And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even think of a number 2." Now
Ooh.
there's something I can pitch to the. I can actually have the 45 like, I'll say, "Hey, guess what? There are more.
There's an
There's a
interest.
lot more." What was there was things like the maneki neko, the beckoning cat that has
Oh
the paw,
yeah.
right? And like that's kind of a really cool history too, and it's kind of yokai-ish, but not. So there was that. Nurikabe is a big wall. It's just a
Oh
wall that
yes.
appears, right? And like if you're
Oh.
Just there.
hiking, it's just so what? But
Just okay. Just stopping. Not being a metaphor at all of being a wall. No weird. No
there's
weirdness here.
very literal.
Just a mental block.
But evidently, as I was studying that one too, it's like it happens. I did on the Uncanny Japan podcast, I think it was my 50th or 100, I can remember, but some like milestone. I was like 100 and I'm going to do something special. And I did real ghostly stories or something from listeners. So I actually asked
Oh.
people to send in any Japanese related something that happened to ghosts, whatever. And someone did send in a nurikabe. They said that it was their friend had told it to them, but they were literally hiking and they got to a point and they couldn't go or something, and there was something and they had to back away. But when they went back, it was gone. Like it was there, but now it's not there.
Whoa.
And they're like, yeah, we should
Oh.
go home now. So they they went back home. But so yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, so it is a thing. I don't
Wow.
know. Yeah, I
That's
yeah, I do
so
have a list
crazy.
of things I
Mm.
want to get to.
Well, we'll pitch that for the second one because I
Yeah.
think there's just so much to cover.
Hmm.
And I know you have two other fictional collections. How is it different to write a nonfiction book? Because I think this is your first nonfiction book, correct? So how is
Yes.
it the process different, or did you enjoy fiction more than you enjoy nonfiction? What does that kind of look like for you?
Oh, that's good. I didn't, when I first was approached with this, I kind of thought, like, this isn't what I do. I'm fiction. I don't do the
Hmm.
nonfiction. So I don't do the research. There's so many people that like are really, really into research and scholars and academics, and I'm not a scholar and I'm not an academic. So I
Hmm.
really had to like come to myself and say, okay, what can I bring to this book that's different than anything I've read in English? So, and once I got over that, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I can do this. So I was excited
Hmm.
about it. But it's also very easy in that it's just research, and then you really have to, the chapters aren't, super long. So you have to like put all the good
Hmm.
stuff in there as much as you can. And a lot got cut. So much got cut. Um, so easy in that you're not making up stories, right? Like these are already out there
Hmm.
stories. Just how can I best present these? How can I
Hmm.
give the best whatever example of what this yokai or ghost or whatever it is. And with fiction, it takes a lot longer, but it's much more anything can go. Like I do the
Hmm.
research, and then I'm
Hmm.
like, all bets are off. I'm like, okay, we're gonna
Yeah.
have an Oni ogre, and he's gonna run a pachinko gambling parlor,
Oh my
and there's gonna,
goodness.
so you just start making up stuff, and
I would read
that's
that.
really fun. But it takes forever
It's
because
the
you're
mythical
always like,
realism.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I wrote a story. It's called The Spider Sweeper. It was translated into Japanese, and actually the Japanese community around here. There's a guy who runs a bookstore, and he's kind of I don't know, he's kind of big in the area, but he read it and he really liked the Japanese, but he liked the English, he liked the Japanese as well, and did a book reading or a story reading of it. And it was very, very well liked in Japanese, right? And it's a story, but the story, it's about three gay, like a monk, and then there's another monk, and then a traveling monk and something. And it's a horror story. So like basically everyone dies. Like one person doesn't die. And someone wrote me and they're like, "Oh, you're killing the gays. This is terrible." And this is like before killing the gays was a thing. I didn't even know it was a thing. I felt terrible. I'm like, "Oh my God, I didn't know that's a thing." But also like everyone in the story, it's not, I was
dies.
Yeah, right. Like the bad guy got died, and then one of the good guys died, but the other good guy lived. Like he's, so I was very like, yeah, like I didn't write it right. Oh no. But everyone in Japan loved it. So wait, what do I do? So, but I think, yeah, that was a story of its time. But yeah, you
It's
can do
always that
anything,
one
but
person.
Yeah.
And so this book, so you did just say that, there's a lot you had to consider when you took on this project. Is there anything that you were really excited to include in this book in terms of the layout? Because what makes this book different for you from other books about Japanese yokai or Japanese folklore out there?
The one thing I really wanted to do was to include the characters, the kanji, the Japanese characters, because when I find with people listening to the show too, back when I studied Japanese, maybe I wasn't very smart, but it was very hard, and there wasn't a lot of material out there. And now there are so many, there's apps, and there's just so many wonderful ways to study Japanese, and people are so good now. Like Japanese learners and speakers are just incredible levels. Like they can speak and they can listen and they can write and they can read. And I find that I get a lot of email and messages of people who go to the show notes and they're like, "Oh, I'm so happy you put the kanji in there because I wanted to know what this temple was." And, if I say koanji just written out, that could be any character, it could be anywhere. There's like a million koanjis in Japan. So I wanted to do that. I wanted like, okay, if you're a studier of, of Japan, if you're not, you just skip over that part. But if you are, you can actually go and look at it because it is kind of cool. Like I really like the characters because they have meanings of their own, and you can go into that. That was one thing I wanted. And then what was the other thing? Oh my gosh, I can't even remember what it was.
It's late. I get it.
It's late. Yeah.
It's okay. Well, I'll jump in with what I really enjoyed. So I did enjoy the stories a lot, but one thing we did on the podcast, I think when we first started, was we would do kind of a deep dive into where you can find these stories in the modern world. And so I really like that you have that here as well in modern stories, and then you kind of go into like where you can see it in media. And so I think it really helps cement the idea that yokai are not just these stories that live in books, but in Japan, they are everywhere. And then even now in the modern world, they're everywhere. So I think it kind of made it a bit more, not real to me, but because I read the introduction and you go on about how it's a part of everyday life. And so it didn't really click for me until I kept seeing the modern stories. And I'm like, they really are everywhere, even for the rest of the world. So that's something I really enjoyed about this because I have a lot of books about myths and stuff, and they usually tend to focus on the story, which is great. But even some of them, I think, they tend to focus too much on what the story is and not so much about like the evolution of the story or how it's changed. And that's something I really appreciate about this book. And I think that our listeners, and I think the listeners of the Uncanny Japan podcast and other podcasts, I think it's becoming more popular that people want to know how the stories have changed, where they've come from, where they can see it. And honestly, for me, like I loved when we first started and we would watch something and we'd be like, that's this trope or that's that character, specifically with Pokemon as well.
Oh
we did that so often with Pokemon.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, just like I remember my son was at the age when Pokemon started and we were watching them, and the first ones were like, yeah, Pikachu, okay, I didn't understand it, Raichu or anything, but as we're going along, I'm like, wait a minute, that's a nine-tailed fox.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's a yokai too. Oh my gosh, what are they doing here? So yeah, for me, I've been away from the country for so long, the country, like the West, North America. So I just know anime and games and manga here, but it's so infiltrated, like it's so everywhere in the world now that it's kind of exciting. Even doing this, kind of looking it up and like, I was excited too. I was like, oh my gosh, it's everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I've been a lifelong Pokemon fan. I've like remember it from when it first came out, and then I usually still try and get the next game that comes out. But I do remember it took me a while, but I remember coming across the Pokemon Frostlass, and I found it. I not usually like horror stuff, but there was something weird and creepy about it that I did vibe with. I was like, I want to know more about this. I remember that was the first time I came across the term yokai and like really like then dove into like, wait a minute, this is everywhere. What I remember that was like a whole new world moment. Like, hold up a minute. Hang on. I need to go back and rethink a lot of things.
Everything has changed.
Everything has changed. I was a little embarrassed it took me that long to figure it out, but I got there.
I know they do a good job of covering them up, right? Like when you know, but when you don't, it's
yeah,
like,
just a spooky
I didn't for the longest
code.
time.
Yeah. So now that we have all our hard-hitting questions out of the way, we do have one incredibly serious question for you.
Oh, no.
If you were a yokai, which yokai would you want to be?
Oh, nice. Okay.
We're a serious podcast.
This is important. Okay. If I were a yokai, I think I would like to be. This is totally not my personality, not my vibe. Anyone who knows me would say, no. But I would like to be a Tengu. Because the Tengu has the long nose and they wear the aesthetic monk robes and they have the wings so they can fly. They own their own mountains. They can control nature. They're powerful. They got these fans that they can like make wind and they can control time. They have telepathy. Like, they can do everything. And they're cool. And they walk around on tall Geta shoes. Yeah. Not anyone who knows me would say,
so this is what Theresa wants to be.
Yes, that's and that photo, that image too, in the book. I got to work a little bit with Michelle and give her some like reference photos and stuff. And with that one, I just had an image of him, a Tengu sitting like on the stairs with the shrine, the gate behind him, and have his hands like on his knees, leaning over. And I'm like, I found someone sitting like that, and I'm like, Michelle, can you use this pose on the stairs with this background? And she did exactly that. I was like, that's my favorite image in the book because it's like better than what I imagined. I'm like, yes, he's so cool.
For the listeners, Fox just held up a picture of the Tengu from the book, and that's what we're referencing right there.
And I'll put a photo of it on the website. So after this, you can listen to this episode, and then you can pop over to our website, and you will find links to purchase the book. You will find links to Theresa's podcast, Uncanny Japan, as well as the Tengu photo, which is going to be, I think, the cover photo of the episode from now on.
Yay!
So,
yes.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Theresa. It was great to pick your brain a little bit about the different aspects of kind of putting this book together, your background, your history. And I thought this was a great conversation, and I would like to keep going, but we want to just be mindful of your time. So we'll end it off. Is there anything else you kind of want to add or share about the book, or anything else you want to add about yourself before we head off? Plug your socials.
Yes, I'm all over social media. Uncanny Japan is like trying to keep up with everything, kinda, not every day, but more or less. And that's it. Working on a mid-grade book, so maybe in the future sometime there'll be this. I'm excited about it. We'll see what happens. So
back to fiction. Will it be more horror, or is it going to be?
This one's going to be kind of a adventure into a forbidden forest, and it's kind of I'm excited about it. We'll see.
Well, do let us know. I'm very excited for whatever you do next, because this has been just absolutely lovely.
This has been so fun.
And we would love updates about your crow. Please put them up somewhere so we can keep track.
I took videos this morning, so so darn
I can't
cute.
wait.
We'll be on the lookout. Thank you so much, travelers, for joining us on this adventure through the Enchanted Forest through Japan with Thersa Matsuura. We hope you enjoyed hearing from Theresa, and be sure to check out the show notes on the new and improved website at talesfromtheenchantedforest.com. We will link the book, our transcript, and links to where you can find out more from Uncanny Japan. If you want to join us on the podcast to share your folklore-related books and media, please do not hesitate to send us a request on talesfromtheenchantedforest@gmail.com. Also, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, then feel free to reach out. Remember, you can always find us on TikTok, Instagram, X, Bluesky, Mastodon, YouTube, and literally anywhere else where you can put up information about yourself. If you enjoyed this podcast, then be sure to leave us a review wherever you listen to your episodes. It helps the podcast grow as well as reach new travelers on these journeys.
And remember, there's always a place for you in the Enchanted Forest.